The black family is not exactly a healthy state, I think a person could say. What can you do to make any difference in the way in which families amongst African Americans are organized and conduct their intimate affairs? Let's talk about the family for a minute, because I see different dimensions to I see a pedagogic thing. How do we do education? I see an economic thing. Let's encourage entrepreneurship and initiative. I see a cultural thing. You talk about intermediate institutions. You talk about the church and about values. I like this idea about the virtues that would be the core of your educational framework. And you keep invoking families. And, we're both African American. We know that 2 in 3 kids who are born to a black woman in this country, even to this day, are born to a woman without a husband. We know the single parenthood and so forth. The black family is not exactly a healthy state, I think a person could say. What can you do to make any difference in the way in which families amongst African Americans are organized and conduct their intimate affairs?
I mean, Glenn, it is one of the most entrenched challenges, by the way, that not only faces the black community, but increasingly the white community. I mean, the non-marital, I particularly focus on young mothers, women 24 and under, because I think we are in a different society right now where if a 38-year-old woman who's worked on Wall Street decides to have a child, that's just a different reality. But if you're 24 and under and you have a child, you have many challenges that are similar to what we used to think about teen mothers, right? So in the black community, if you're a woman 24 and under, in 2018, 91% of those women who had a baby in 2018, that was a non-marital birth. In the white community, it's 61%. So the numbers in aggregate, there are actually more white babies being born to young white mothers than there are total numbers of blacks, but the ratios are just extraordinary. And 41% of those same young unmarried mothers in 2018 were having between their 2nd through their 8th child, right? So this idea of multiple partner fertility. So what do you think the likelihood is of kids who are born into that situation having equal odds of success? It doesn't mean that they're not guaranteed, it doesn't mean that they may not, they somehow may be able to overcome their circumstance. But the challenges that we're putting forth and for both the parent and the child are enormous. So you ask, what can we do about that? Right. So you ask, what can we do about that?
Yeah.
So first of all, we have to talk about it and acknowledge it. If you listen to most of the debate right now, particularly as it relates to the black community, and we're talking about structural racism and all the barriers, you almost never hear a discussion around, well, those things can be true, that there's structural barriers around race, but what are the conditions that many children are being born into that make them more vulnerable to being victims of those structural barriers? And are there things that we can do to change that situation? So one of the things I talk about a lot in schools, there is data from the Brookings Institution and others that says that if you get your high school degree, get a full-time job of any type, just you learn the dignity and discipline of work, and if you have a child, get married first. If you follow that series of steps, the data shows that 98% of the time you avoid poverty. It's not 100%, so it's no guarantee, but that's certainly the kind of information that many young people in low-income, rural, and urban communities don't know. So perhaps we should be teaching that in schools as a non-prescriptive.
Okay, if you teach that, please indulge me, because I was trained in statistics as a PhD in economics, and I just have to say this, okay? The fact that if I compare people who do those things that you said, complete high school, marry, work first, then the children work, complete high school, work, marry, and have children, then the chance of poverty is very low. Does not imply that if I take a given individual and I, instead of dropping out of high school or not marrying or not working first, I do those things, that for that individual, the outcome would change. The reason it doesn't imply that is that people may be different with respect to other traits than the ones that you're focusing on: work, marriage, and schooling. They may differ with respect to ambition, resilience, ability to postpone gratification, a sense of filial piety. There are all these things that they could differ. People who have particular traits along these other dimensions may do the things that you're talking about. They may complete school. They may wait before they get children to marry, et cetera, et cetera. And it'll look as if it was the doing of those things that caused the low poverty outcome. Yep. But it was, in fact, what we would say is the heterogeneity of the population. So correlation, not causation, it would be the observation. And this is not an argument against teaching kids to marry before they have children, against teaching them to complete their educations, and against teaching them to value work. This is saying that, entrenched poverty is a very deep and complicated problem and won't necessarily yield to formulas and nostrums of the sort that you were just giving voice to. I say that with respect because I'm really being a devil's advocate here to a certain degree and giving you an opportunity to respond to that kind of critique.
Yeah. So taken with full respect and appreciated, there is no silver bullet. And it is very true that someone could follow all of those steps and still not be successful. I mean, how many of us know children of married, two-parent households, stable, where the kids ran into all sorts of issues, right? And we've had children of single parents who've grown up to be president, right? So life is not a guarantee. The question is, what do we teach our children, by the way, before they have made decisions, right? The whole idea is this isn't a value judgment. In fact, one of the things I recommend for people who are considering teaching this content in schools is before you engage the kids, you actually teach the adults. You say, you chose our school because you thought we were going to give your child the best information that they could make good decisions about their life. And so we're telling you up front, we're not teaching this information about this pathway of decision making to make you feel bad, parent, if you may not have chosen this path in your own life. But we feel that this is information your kids need to know. There's no guarantee. And it's being taught in a non-prescriptive way because we're going to show here's the probability of success with this series of decisions. Here's the probability of success with this series of decisions. And then ultimately, you decide. You are the master of your own destiny. And so I just feel it's very important that this information exists. There is no one who can say this is causal, right? No one. If there are people who are saying that, then they're jumping the evidence, right? All we can say to young people is, based on the known information, by doing lots of regressive analysis of people who've changed their economic station in life, these are the factors which seem to make a difference. And by the way, Raj Chetty just did, research of 40 million records testing the concept of upward mobility. And he found the rates of marriage and father presence were two of the biggest factors within a given community. So
again, just a small corrective. He did indeed find that with respect to the composition of the neighborhoods or the communities from which the people came, not with respect to the composition of the personal households from which they came.
It is interesting.
It's better if they came up in a community in which a lot of the families were intact, but not necessarily if their specific family was intact.
No, it's a very interesting wrinkle to the evidence. But frankly, if it's so good that if it's so important that the community have more strong fathers and more married families, then hey, why don't I be one of those? Why don't make my household one of those that has such,
no way to get there except one family at a time, so to speak.
Well, that's true. Exactly. And
okay,
so
what about I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, it's very important because I don't want to be dogmatic on these things. And I think it's very important to be very evidence-based. And so often I ask, well, what's the alternative? What is it that we should be teaching kids? And frankly, if I run schools, elementary and middle school, and now I'm going to be launching a network of high schools. So what is it our responsibility as adults to teach children about the strategies that seem to be correlated to human flourishing? Do we just step back and say, no, we're not going to share this information because somehow we have some, moral fear? And to me, it's the moral opposite. We have an obligation to tell kids this information.